Most people hear the words heavy metal, and they think of music, the riffs, the screaming, the chaos on stage. What they don't think about is a frontman trying to hire a hitman at a gym, a guitarist setting churches on fire before stabbing his bandmate 23 times, or a case so disturbing a judge had to stop and describe it as new depths of depravity. This is not rumor. This is not internet speculation. Every name in this video was convicted in a court of law. These are the darkest criminal cases ever tied to heavy metal. And by the time we reach number 1, you'll understand why some stories should never be forgotten. Before we start, this is not surface-level content. If you want real stories, real records, and the truth behind the music industry, hit subscribe right now. Because on Metal Icons, we don't just talk about legends, we document what actually happened. Stay till the end, because the final case is on a completely different level. Number 12. Vince Neil, vehicular manslaughter. Vince Neil was the frontman of Mötley Crüe and one of the most recognizable faces in 1980s glam metal. At the peak of the band's commercial ascent, his public image was inseparable from the excess that defined the Sunset Strip scene. The parties, the lifestyle, and the near-complete absence of responsible decision-making. On December 8, 1984, that lifestyle had a direct and fatal consequence. Neil had been at a house party at his home in Hollywood. At some point during the evening, he and Nicholas Razzle Dingley, the drummer for Finnish glam rock band Hanoi Rocks, who were on tour in the United States at the time, decided to make a beer run to a nearby liquor store. Neil got behind the wheel. He was intoxicated. Driving on Redondo Beach Boulevard, Neil lost control of his vehicle and crossed into oncoming traffic, colliding with 2 occupants in another car. Razzle was thrown from the vehicle and died at the scene from head trauma. He was 24 years old. The 2 occupants of the other vehicle, Tamara Haley and Lisa Hogan, sustained serious injuries. Haley suffered permanent brain damage and spent a month in a coma. Neil was arrested and charged with vehicular manslaughter and drunk driving. The legal outcome was, by any reasonable measure, extraordinary in its leniency. Vince Neil pleaded no contest to vehicular manslaughter. He was sentenced to 30 days in jail, of which he served 20 days. He was also ordered to pay $2.6 million in civil damages to the victims and their families and sentenced to 200 hours of community service. 20 days in jail for killing a person and permanently brain damaging another. Neil has spoken about the accident in various interviews over the decades. The Crüe addressed it publicly in their biography, The Dirt. Razzle's death effectively ended Hanoi Rocks, as the band did not continue after losing their drummer. Neil continued his career with Mötley Crüe without interruption, resuming tours and recording without any meaningful pause. To number 11, Gaahl, aggravated assault and torture. Gaahl, the stage name of Christian Eyvind Espedal, is the vocalist for the Norwegian black metal band Gorgoroth and one of the most recognizable figures in the Norwegian black metal scene. His stage persona is built around an extreme and confrontational aesthetic, and his interviews over the years have consistently leaned into an image of genuine menace. As it turns out, some of that was not an image. Gaahl has been convicted of aggravated assault on 2 separate occasions, both involving incidents where he did not merely assault his victims, but held them captive and subjected them to prolonged torture. The first incident occurred in 2002. Gaahl was convicted of assault following an altercation that resulted in serious injury to the victim. He received a suspended sentence. The second and more severe incident occurred in 2004. Gaahl became involved in a confrontation with another man at a party. According to court testimony and documentation, He did not simply assault the man, he detained him for several hours, beating him severely and collecting the victim's blood in a cup. During the trial, Gaahl stated that he had considered drinking the blood. When asked about this on the stand, his mother testified in his defense, notably stating that her son was a vegetarian and particular about food, therefore unlikely to consume blood. That testimony exists in the public record. Gaahl was convicted of aggravated assault for the 2004 incident and sentenced to 14 months in a Norwegian prison. He was released, returned to music, and has continued performing and recording with Gorgoroth and other projects. And he has given numerous interviews since his release without notably addressing either incident in depth. Number 10. Tim Lambesis, Solicitation of Murder. Tim Lambesis was the founder and vocalist of As I Lay Dying, a metalcore band from San Diego that achieved significant commercial success through the mid-2000s and early 2010s, releasing records on Metal Blade and touring at arena level on the Warped Tour circuit. By his own admission in subsequent interviews, Lambesis developed a serious anabolic steroid dependency during this period of the band's success. The behavioral effects of prolonged heavy steroid use are documented: increased aggression, paranoia, and impaired judgment among them. Lambesis and his wife, Megan Murphy, whom he had married in 2003 and with whom he had adopted 3 children, began experiencing severe marital problems. Megan filed for divorce in 2012, citing his steroid use and erratic behavior as primary factors. Rather than proceeding through a standard divorce, Lambesis decided he wanted his wife dead. He did not hire a professional through any reliable or covert channel. He approached an individual at his local gym and asked whether that person knew of anyone who could be hired to commit a murder. That individual went directly to law enforcement. Police set up an undercover operation in which an officer posed as a contract killer. On May 7, 2013, Lambesis met with the undercover officer at a Barnes & Noble in Oceanside, California. He handed the officer $1,000 in cash in an envelope and provided a detailed written document including his wife's home address, her daily schedule, and instructions for entry into the residence. When the undercover officer directly asked Lambesis whether he wanted Megan dead, Lambesis confirmed verbally. The conversation was recorded. He was arrested immediately following the meeting. Lambesis pleaded guilty to solicitation of murder in May 2014 and was sentenced to 6 years in state prison. He was released in 2016 after serving approximately 2.5 years. He has since reunited with As I Lay Dying and returned to performing and recording. He has been married twice since the incident. Number 9. Pat O'Brien. Burglary, assault on a law enforcement officer, weapons charges. Pat O'Brien has been the lead guitarist for Cannibal Corpse since 1997, replacing Bob Rousey and contributing to some of the band's most celebrated albums, including Gallery of Suicide, Bloodthirst, and Kill. On the night of December 16, 2018, in his home of Lutz, Florida, O'Brien experienced what was broadly characterized by observers and later legal proceedings as a severe acute mental health episode. According to Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office reports, O'Brien broke into a neighbor's home and behaved erratically and violently inside the residence, shoving a woman and concealing himself in a closet. He was reportedly shouting that the rapture was imminent. While this was happening, O'Brien's own home nearby was fully engulfed in fire. When law enforcement arrived at the scene of the break-in, O'Brien fled to the backyard. A responding deputy located him and issued commands to stop. O'Brien charged at the deputy while holding a knife, and the deputy deployed a taser and took him into custody without lethal force being used, a notable outcome given Florida's legal and law enforcement standards regarding threats against officers. When fire crews and police later searched and processed O'Brien's fire-damaged home, they recovered a weapons cache of substantial scale, over 50 shotguns, 10 semi-automatic rifles, 2 Uzis, approximately 20 handguns, 2 flamethrowers, and extensive quantities of ammunition. O'Brien was charged with burglary with assault, battery, and resisting an officer with violence. He was ultimately sentenced to time served, 150 hours of community service, and mandatory completion of a rehabilitation program. Cannibal Corpse publicly supported O'Brien throughout the legal process. He has made limited appearances with other acts since the incident, but has not returned to Cannibal Corpse's active lineup. The band has continued with touring guitarist. Number 8. Carl Kennedy / Manowar, possession of child sexual abuse material. Manowar have occupied a specific and self-constructed corner of heavy metal since their formation in New York in 1980. Their catalog is built on an identity of extreme mythological bravado, the self-proclaimed kings of metal who recorded songs about battle, honor, and dying for metal. Their longtime guitarist, Carl Logan, had been a member since 1994 and performed on the majority of their major releases from Louder Than Hell onward. On August 9, 2018, Logan was arrested in Gaston County, North Carolina, on 6 counts of third-degree sexual exploitation of a minor. The charges related to the possession and distribution of child sexual abuse material, specifically the knowing download and storage of illegal videos depicting the sexual abuse of children. He was not charged with the production or direct commission of acts against children, but the nature of the material and the volume of charges indicated deliberate and sustained criminal conduct. Logan was convicted and sentenced to 5.5 years in prison in 2022. Manowar removed Logan from the band following his arrest. He has had no public presence in the music world since. Number 7. Faust, Murder Board. Faust. Eitan was the drummer for Emperor, one of the foundational bands of the Norwegian black metal scene, and one of the most musically influential acts the genre ever produced. Emperor's debut album, In the Nightside Eclipse, 1994, remains a landmark record. Faust's drumming was a central component of that record's sound. In August 1992, Faust was walking home from a bar in Lillehammer, Norway, when he was approached by Magne Andreassen, a 37-year-old man who propositioned him for a sexual encounter. Faust agreed to accompany Andreassen into a wooded area near a local lake. Once there, Faust attacked Andreassen, stabbing him 37 times and killing him. The motivation, as stated by Faust in subsequent years, was a combination of impulsive violence and the ideological atmosphere of the early black metal scene, which at that time was saturated with competitive performances of nihilism and transgression. Faust has described it as an act of impulse rooted in both homophobia and a general predisposition toward violence that he has since expressed deep regret over. He told a small number of other black metal scene members about the killing. Most reportedly did not believe him. He was not immediately connected to the crime. In 1993, Faust was arrested in connection with aiding and abetting arson, specifically involvement in the burning of Holmenkollen Chapel in Oslo. During the course of that investigation, he confessed to the Lillehammer murder. He was convicted of murder and sentenced to 14 years in prison. He served 9 years and 4 months before his release. He has since returned to music and has spoken publicly about the crime on multiple occasions, consistently expressing remorse and contextualizing it within the specific and pathological subculture of the early Norwegian black metal scene. Number 6. Jean-Pascal Fournier, murder of his father. Jean-Pascal Fournier, known professionally as Christoph Speidel in some contexts, though this incident involves the artist known for creating logos and album artwork under his own name, was a French visual artist whose illustrated artwork appeared on releases from a substantial number of prominent metal bands across multiple subgenres, including Immortal, Avantasia, Dragon Force, Unleash the Archers, Elven King, Impaled Nazarene, and Angel Corpse, among many others. His work was visible on records that sold hundreds of thousands of copies globally. On March 29, 2020, Fournier shot his 80-year-old father in the head with an arrow at the family's home in France. He then beat the body and disemboweled it while his elderly mother was present elsewhere in the house. After the killing, Fournier placed his empty car near a cliff and pushed it over, an apparent attempt to simulate his own death or disappearance. He was not in the vehicle. The following day, Fournier jumped from a bridge in what appears to have been a genuine suicide attempt. He survived. Police located him at the base of the bridge and took him into custody. As of the available public record, details beyond these immediate events, including motive, psychiatric evaluations, and final sentencing, have not been reported in sufficient detail to confirm. The case appeared to move through the French judicial system without the level of international media coverage that would typically produce accessible documentation. What is confirmed is the killing and the subsequent events. If you're still watching, you already feel how real this gets. These aren't just headlines. These are lives destroyed, decisions that can't be undone. Comment below. Which case shocked you the most so far? And if you want more deep, unfiltered breakdowns like this, subscribe to Metal Icons, because this list is only getting darker from here. Number 5. The Murder of Dimebag Darrell. This entry is structured differently from the others on this list because the criminal is not a musician. He is a man who committed a premeditated mass shooting at a metal concert, and the victim was one of the most beloved guitarists in heavy metal history. Dimebag Darrell Abbott was the lead guitarist and co-founder of Pantera, the Texas-based band that became one of the defining acts of American heavy metal through the 1990s. After Pantera's dissolution in 2003, Darrell and his brother, drummer Vinnie Paul, formed Damageplan and began touring. On December 8, 2004, Damageplan was performing at the Alrosa Villa, a small club in Columbus, Ohio. The show had approximately 250 people in attendance. The band was a few songs into their opening when Nathan Gaahl, a 25-year-old former United States Marine, pushed through the crowd, climbed onto the stage, and shot Dimebag Darrell in the head from close range. Darrell was killed instantly. Gaahl then continued firing. The band's head of security, Jeff Thompson, physically tackled Gaahl and was shot and killed. Crew member Aaron Hawk was also shot and killed while attempting to intervene. Audience member Nathan Bray was shot and killed while attempting to help Darrell's body. 3 other people were wounded. Gaahl took a member of the tour crew hostage on stage. Columbus police officer James Niggemeyer entered the club through a rear entrance, positioned himself behind Gaahl without being detected, and shot and killed him with a shotgun, ending the attack. The hostage was unharmed. Gaahl had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. His documented fixation on Pantera had evolved, as is characteristic of untreated paranoid schizophrenia, from admiration into delusional enmity. He had told people in his life that he was pursuing lawsuits against Pantera members, believing they were stealing his identity and musical ideas. He arrived at the show that night with the stated intention, later established through witness accounts, of killing both Dimebag Darrell and Vinnie Paul. Darrell Abbott was 38 years old. He was buried in a Kiss casket personally provided by Gene Simmons, and Eddie Van Halen placed one of his own guitars in the casket at the funeral, an instrument Darrell had long admired. December 8, 2004 was also the 24th anniversary of the murder of John Lennon. Number 4. Joe France/Goatlord, Double Murder and Suicide. Goatlord were an extreme metal band from Las Vegas, active from 1987 through 1997. They built a legitimate underground following through the tape trading circuit and were respected within the extreme metal underground for their demo recordings. After the band dissolved, our guitarist Joe France largely disappeared from the public music scene. On October 2, 2015, at approximately 7 a.m., France entered the home of his neighbor, a 39-year-old woman. He shot and killed her in front of her 3 children. He then abducted the woman's oldest son and took the child back to his own home, where he killed the boy. He then took his own life. Neighbors who later spoke to media described France's behavior in the weeks preceding the killings as increasingly erratic and alarming. He had sold most of his belongings, boarded and barricaded his windows, and had erected skateboard ramps in his yard despite not having children. These behaviors, in retrospect, indicated a severe deterioration of mental state in the period leading up to the murders. There was no manifesto, no communicated motive, and no prior criminal record that has been publicly reported. The crimes were reported across metal news outlets and regional Nevada media. The victims were identified, but the full circumstances behind France's state of mind were never publicly established, given that he did not survive. Number 3. Varg Vikernes and the church burnings/murder of Euronymous. If any single figure encapsulates the most extreme documented criminal history within the black metal scene, it is Varg Vikernes, known by his musical alias Burzum, whose acts between 1992 and 1993 became the most internationally reported crimes in heavy metal history. Vikernes was a founding member of the Norwegian black metal scene and participated in what became an organized, if loosely structured, campaign of arson against Christian churches across Norway beginning in 1992. And he was officially charged with and convicted of 3 church arsons and was suspected in connection with several others. The targets included Fantoft Stave Church in Bergen, a historically significant 12th century structure, as well as Osane Church and Stortveit Church. The fires were not random acts of vandalism. They were ideologically motivated attacks rooted in a combination of anti-Christian extremism and a competitive performance of transgression within the black metal community. Vikernes and Euronymous, Øystein Arseth, the guitarist for Mayhem and one of the central figures of the Norwegian black metal scene, had developed a documented and escalating personal rivalry. Both men were involved in the inner circle of what was referred to as the Black Circle, or the inner circle of Norwegian black metal, a loose association of musicians and associated individuals responsible for multiple church burnings and other criminal acts. In August 1993, Vikernes traveled to Oslo and went to Euronymous' apartment. What occurred there is disputed in its details. The 2 men fought, and Vikernes stabbed Euronymous 23 times. 2 wounds were to the skull, 5 to the neck, and 16 to the back, according to the forensic report. Euronymous died at the scene. Vikernes was arrested, tried, and convicted of the murder of Euronymous and the arson of 3 churches. He was sentenced to 21 years in prison, the maximum possible sentence under Norwegian law at the time. His conduct during imprisonment was not passive. He wrote extensively for far-right and neo-Nazi publications from prison. In 1997, he was involved in a failed escape attempt and was implicated in a broader group that Norwegian authorities investigated for suspected domestic terrorism, which included plans to break him out of prison. His mother was arrested in connection with providing funds to this group, though she maintained she was unaware of the specifics of how the money would be used. In October 2003, having been moved to a lower security facility, Vikernes escaped. He carjacked a vehicle at gunpoint and was apprehended the following day. Police found in his possession a knife, a gas mask, camouflage clothing, a GPS device, maps, a laptop, and a mobile phone. A search of a nearby cabin he had used during his escape revealed a handgun and an automatic rifle. He was released from prison in 2009 after serving approximately 15 years. He relocated to France. I continued making Burzum music and has spent much of his post-prison public life producing ideological content that centers on racial nationalism and Norse mythology-based far-right ideology. Number 2. Beasts of Satan, Double Murder, Cult Killing, Subsequent Murder, and Cover-Up. The Beasts of Satan were not a successful or well-known metal band. They were a loosely organized group based in Somma Lombardo, near Milan, Italy, whose activities in the late 1990s resulted in 2 murders that went unsolved for 6 years and a 3rd murder that ultimately exposed the entire case. The group formed around Andrea Volpe, who led a small collection of individuals whose shared interest in heavy metal had evolved into the adoption of satanic ritual practice, combined with heavy drug and alcohol use. On January 17, 1998, De Volpe led 2 members of his immediate social group into a wooded area near Golaseca. Fabio Tollis, 16, who was among the founding members of the Beasts of Satan band, and his girlfriend, Chiara Marino, 19. The rest of the group was waiting. What had been presented as a ritual gathering became an ambush. Marino was stabbed to death by the group. Tollis was restrained, then beaten with a hammer and stabbed by his closest friend, Volpe, until he was dead. The group reportedly placed leaves in the mouths of the dying teenagers, urinated on their bodies, and danced on top of the grave they had dug in advance. Both bodies were buried at the site. For 6 years, the murders went unsolved. Fabio Tollis's father, Michel Tollis, refused to accept the official finding that his son had simply disappeared. He conducted what became a one-man investigation, going through his son's belongings, mapping connections within the group, identifying satanic symbolism, interviewing people, and building a documented case file. He brought his findings to police on multiple occasions over those 6 years. He was dismissed each time. In January 2004, Volpe murdered his former girlfriend of 9 years, Mariangela Pezzotta, who had become a liability. She knew details about the 1998 killings. He invited her to his home under normal pretenses, shot her in the neck, then called a fellow Beasts of Satan member, Nicolas Sapone, for assistance. Sapone arrived, noted that Pezzotta was still alive, and the 2 men beat her severely and buried her while she was still breathing. In the aftermath, Volpe and his girlfriend and accomplice, Elisabetta Ballerini, consumed large quantities of heroin and cocaine and drove to dispose of the victim's vehicle by submerging it in a river. Ballerini overdosed in the car and crashed before reaching the river. Volpe, in a state of panic, ran into the street and flagged down passers-by until police arrived, at which point he admitted to heavy drug use and asked them to help Ballerini. He had just beaten a woman to death hours earlier. Pezzotta's body was found shortly after. When police began investigating Volpe for her murder, Michel Tollis presented his full case file, 6 years of documented evidence connecting Volpe and the group to the 1998 killings. This time, with Volpe already in custody, the evidence was taken seriously. Volpe confessed to all 3 murders and led police to the bodies of Tollis and Marino in the woods where they had been buried. Volpe received a 30-year sentence. Several other members of the group received life sentences. The group was also suspected in connection with other deaths of former Beasts of Satan members that remained officially unsolved. Michel Tollis, the father who refused to stop, was the primary reason the 1998 murders were ever solved. Number 1. Ian Watkins, Lost Prophets. This entry requires a direct content warning. The crimes committed by Ian Watkins, the vocalist of Lost Prophets, are among the most severe documented in the history of any music genre. They are described here accurately because minimizing or vaguely referencing them would do a disservice to the victims and to the documented public record. Lost Prophets were a Welsh rock band that achieved major commercial success in the early 2000s, particularly in the United Kingdom, and with records including Start Something, 2004, and Liberation Transmission, 2006. The band toured internationally at arena level and were a prominent feature of the mainstream alternative rock landscape throughout the decade. Ian Watkins, as the band's frontman, occupied a position of significant public visibility and considerable access to fans, particularly young female fans. In 2012, Watkins was arrested on unrelated drug charges. During the subsequent search of his digital devices and communications, investigators discovered evidence that extended well beyond drug offenses. The investigation that followed was described by the lead detective as producing the worst material he had encountered in his professional career. While Watkins was charged with, and in November 2013 pleaded guilty to the following: conspiracy to engage in sexual activity with a child under 13, attempted rape of a child under 13, 6 counts of sexual assault on children, possessing child sexual abuse images, and possession of images of sexual abuse involving an animal. 2 female co-defendants, fans of the band who had facilitated crimes against their own infant children, were also convicted. The judge presiding over the sentencing described the crimes as representing new depths of depravity and called Watkins a committed, organized pedophile. A second judge described him as among the most dangerous offenders encountered by the court. Watkins was sentenced to 29 years in prison with a minimum term before parole consideration. Since his imprisonment, Watkins has demonstrated no remorse. He has made statements to other inmates minimizing the crimes, referring to them with casual indifference. He has continued attempting to contact and communicate with young female fans from within prison. Police had received formal warnings about Watkins's behavior from at least 6 individuals prior to his arrest. Some reports indicate complaints dating as far back as 2008. No action was taken on these warnings until the 2012 drug arrest produced physical evidence that could not be set aside. In the year this video was produced, Watkins was attacked in prison by 3 other inmates and stabbed multiple times. He survived. These 12 cases exist in the public court record. The convictions are documented. The sentences are documented. Some of these people have returned to music. Some remain incarcerated. Some are dead. The music, in some cases, persists independently of the person who made it. And how any listener chooses to engage with that question is a matter between them and their own judgment. What this list documents is simply what happened, who did it, and what the courts determined. The metal community is not defined by these cases, but they are part of the record, and the record doesn't disappear because it's uncomfortable. 12 names, 12 convictions, and 12 reminders that talent doesn't cancel consequences. Some of these people went back to music, some are still behind bars, and some will never leave the damage they caused behind. The music might live on, but so does the record. If this video changed how you see the industry, subscribe to Metal Icons, because the next story might be even harder to listen to than this one.